Respected Chairperson, Dr. Tarpan Kaur, Professor, Department of Psychiatry, MJ Medical College and Hospital, Navi Mumbai, and Madam is also founder and consultant psychiatrist of Sadhguru Mind Care and B Mind Mumbai, Maharashtra. Today's speaker is Dr. Pavitra Jayasankar. She's an assistant professor, Department of Psychiatry, Enhanced Bangalore, Karnataka. Today moderators are Dr. Aswath Babu, Dr. Noor Hassan, and today Dr. Suresh Kumar, consultant psychiatrist of Sneha Mind Care Hospital, Tirunelveli. My dear colleagues, practicing psychiatrists, postgraduates, very good morning to all of you. I extend my warm welcome to all of you for this Jabal webinar. Indeed, it's a great privilege for us to organize this All India PG Jabal webinar. And we have been conducting this Jabal webinar almost for the past 2.5 years on every fourth Sunday. Maybe in between someone may be missed. There is a overwhelming response and support for this webinars among the postgraduates as well as practicing psychiatrists across India. We are choosing a very relevant topic to the postgraduates, and the speaker is also for the above webinar is well known and eminent personality, and the chairperson is also a senior postgraduate teacher. The webinar is not only for the postgraduates, but it's also refreshing for the practicing psychiatrists. I'm very thankful to Dr. Tarpan Kaur, Madam, chairperson, in spite of this busy schedule and in the conference, middle of the conference, is joining the session to chair this webinar. And also Speaker Dr. Pavitra Jayasankar for accepting our invitation to join this program in spite of the busy Sunday schedule. Today's speaker, Dr. Pavitra Jayasankar, is from Demands Bangalore. We all know that Demands is a very premier institute in Southeast Asia. And Dr. Pavitra is an eminent postgraduate teacher. And Dr. Pavitra is going to speak about a very important topic, that's art of choosing mood stabilizer. I hope this topic will definitely useful for the postgraduates and as well as for the practicing psychiatrist. The speaker will ask 5 questions during her presentation. The first and quick responder will receive an attractive prize, and all the participant postgraduates, you can enter your correct answer in the chat box. The postgraduates who won the last prizes will be announced by the moderator, Dr. Aswath Babu. Now I hand over the session to the moderator, Dr. Aswath Babu. Over to you, Dr. Aswath.
Thank you, sir. Very good morning to everyone here today. Welcome to the Evolve Psychiatry Lecture Series. We are honored to host participants from across the nation. Thank you for the continued participation that drives the success of this program. Myself, Dr. Aswath Babu, currently working as consultant psychiatrist at Sneha Mind Care Hospital. I'll be moderating today's session with Dr. Noor Hassan sir and Dr. Suresh Kumar. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our course director, Dr. C. Paniselvan sir, director and senior consultant at Sneha Mind Care Hospital. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to be part of this great journey. Before moving on to the session proper, I would like to introduce previous session's quiz winners. I'll read the names out. Dr. Nishchal Krishna Macharla from SRM Medical College, Chennai. Dr. Nidhi Shri from ESIC Medical College, Chennai. Dr. Nivedita Hebbar from TVMCH, Tirunelveli, Tamil Nadu. Dr. M. Jayashri, psychiatrist from Perambalur GH. Dr. Pungulali from Chennai. Dr. Pavitra S. Nath from Thrissur, Kerala. Dr. Kalpana Devi from Tirunelveli. Dr. Saranya Bharati from Nagarkoil, Tamil Nadu. Congrats to the winners. We will be having quiz today also. Our speaker for the day, Dr. Pavitra Jayasankar ma'am, will be asking questions in between the presentations. The participants are instructed to type their responses in the chat box only. First 2 members giving the correct answers will be selected as winners for each question. The winners will be announced in the next session. On that note, I move on to introduce our esteemed chairperson for the day, Dr. Darpan Kaur ma'am. She is currently Professor of Psychiatry, Department of Psychiatry, Mahatma Gandhi Missions Medical College, Navi Mumbai. She is the founder and consultant psychiatrist at Sadhguru Mind Care and V Mind Mumbai. She is elected Leadership Council member of World Psychiatric Association, Conflict Management and Resolution Section. She is also chairperson of Indian Psychiatric Society Technology and Psychiatry Subcommittee. She has also won the award, Top Most Mental Health Leadership Award. Ma'am, we are truly honored to have you with us today. Now I humbly request you to introduce the topic for the day, ma'am. Over to you, Dr. Darpan Kaur, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwath Babu Srinivasan, for a wonderful introduction. And thank you, Dr. Paneer Selvan, sir, for inviting me to be a chairperson for this program titled Evolve. And thank you, East West Pharma as well. And I think that it's a great opportunity for me to chair this session and interact with so many young postgraduate psychiatry residents across the country. Very informative and very nice program, and it is very nice for me to introduce the topic. And the topic today selected is the art of choosing a mood stabilizer. I think that the title, along with art, I would like to reframe it: the art and science of choosing a mood stabilizer. So I think that a lot of it goes in our thinking into how we must choose a mood stabilizer, but it's also an art and a science. And we all commonly understand that mood stabilizers are routinely practiced in our psychiatry practice. We generally follow our relevant evidence-based guidelines, which are there for indications of psychiatric disorder. But at the end of the day, we use our own clinical thinking, our experience over the years, that which stabilizer specifically will benefit which subgroup of patients. So as we know, the title, it is called mood stabilizer, and uh, its aim should be to stabilize the mood. A lot of mood disorders, such as bipolar affective disorder and variants of bipolar affective disorder, there's primary indication of mood stabilizer. A lot of other soft bipolar conditions, personality disorders, borderline personality disorder, mood stabilizer as an augmenting to various psychiatric conditions. And these are some areas where today's presentation should touch upon. And as we understand that the art is our own thinking, our own experience, but we also should know that technology is nowadays playing a very big role, and every psychiatrist in his brain will have their own brain intelligence, just as how AI has come up to give us guidance. The experience of a psychiatrist to know which patient will respond to which mood stabilizer, that is the clinical science. And we can think of algorithms, guidelines, or even tech-driven decision makings, but it's the art and science. And as a resident, when you are attending this webinar, I'm sure that you will get lots of insights which you can link it for case-based your own thinking, review the literature, and as well as decide whether it would be which molecule that you feel would be most suited for your patient. So amongst the vast list of mood stabilizers that are available and anti-manic drugs, lithium, sodium valproate, carbamazepine, and so many of the newer mood stabilizers as well, and roles such as lamotrigine, topiramate. I'm sure that there are a lot of new drugs in development as well for these conditions. So I look forward to attending the presentation by the speakers and look forward to the question answer sessions with the audience towards the end. So thank you so much. I now would request Dr. Ashwath Babu to please take it over and to welcome the speakers. Am I supposed to welcome the speaker, or
No, ma'am. We will take care of that part, ma'am. We will take care of it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashwath Babu Srinivasan. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for setting the stage, ma'am. Now we move on to speaker introduction. It is always a happy note to share dais with Dr. Nurul Hasan, sir. We share a very close bond. Having him in Evolve again is a very good thing. Dr. Nurul Hasan, sir, now I request you to introduce the speaker for the day, sir.
Yes, sir. So, good morning, Dr. Paneerselvam, sir, Madam Dr. Kau, and moderator Dr. Ashwath Babu. Myself, Dr. Nurul Hasan, psychiatrist from Alpha Mindcare and Kaveri Hospital, Tirunelveli. And this is the time to introduce our speaker, Dr. Pavitra Jaishankar. Dr. Pavitra completed her MBBS from Mohan Kumar Mangalam Medical College, Salem. Completed her MD in psychiatry from NIMHANS, Bangalore, and subsequently completed her PDF in neuropsychiatry from the same institute. She continued as a senior resident in the Department of Psychiatry for another 2 years. Currently working as assistant professor at Center for Brain and Mind at NIMHANS, Bangalore. Her areas of interest are bipolar disorder and cognition, neurobiology of psychiatric illness, applications of near-infrared spectroscopy. Madam has published more than 20 peer-reviewed articles in national and international journals with a H-index of 6, has been a peer reviewer of multiple national and international journals. Her recent publication from 2026 January from Journal of Psychiatric Spectrum was Efficacy and Tolerability of Lumateperone in Acute Bipolar Depression, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. Madam is a recipient of many awards. To quote a few, Madam received a gold medal and Best Outgoing Student Award from MD Psychiatry and SS Jairam Award from IPSOCON 2021 and recently received a Romi Reddy Award from IPSOCON 2025. After all, Dr. Pavitra is my classmate from MD Psychiatry in NIMHANS. It's been a great honor to introduce you as a speaker in this forum, Madam. Thank you. The dais is yours.
Can we start the presentation?
Yes,
Yes,
Madam.
ma'am.
My slides visible?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. As Dr. Nurul was mentioning, he's my friend from our postgraduate. It was truly overwhelming to hear from him about my introduction. Truly a honor. And I thank this Evolve Forum and the course director, Paneerselvan sir, chairperson, Dr. Darpan Kaur ma'am, and the other moderators, Ashwath Babu sir and Suresh Kumar sir, for giving me this opportunity and this topic, which is my one of the favorite topics which I would like to talk anywhere. So the topic is about the art of choosing mood stabilizer, which actually sits at the heart of the bipolar disorder management. So I have restricted my my discussion with mainly bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, not gone to other indications in the interest of time, and also restricted more to clinical pragmatic approaches in choosing a mood stabilizer rather than just going through the guidelines. Of course, we will incorporate the guidelines from various recent ones. The most recent one being the very, very recent Indian Psychiatric Society Clinical Practice Guidelines of Bipolar Disorder in 2026. And of course, our famous, well-known CANMAT Guidelines 2018. And I have also reviewed some of the relevant global and Indian literature appropriately. Before going to the topic, I would like to acknowledge our institute, National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, and the project where I'm working in, the Center for Brain and Mind. You could see the whole clinical team where I lead the team, and funded by Rohini Nilekani Philanthropies. I'm deeply grateful to Professor Muralidharan Keshavan, Professor of Psychiatry at NIMHANS, for his generous inputs, clinical wisdom, and foundational framework, not only for this presentation, throughout my journey in mood disorders. Okay, let us set the context of what this presentation will cover. So basically, as I said, I am not going to cover about the theoretical basis of mechanism of action of drugs or the phenomenology or the definitions used in bipolar disorder. I guess there would be another presentation, or it was already covered before. I would be focusing more on these 10 headings. The first one being setting the context, why it is necessary to know about this art and science of choosing a mood stabilizer, and what does an ideal mood stabilizer mean. And I would also be covering on a 4-axis decision framework, which I urge all of you to use it at your bedside clinical practice. And moving on to phase-specific treatment, which is a current trend, as you see in most of the guidelines, and some drug-by-drug profiles for clinical tips, and covering some special situations, our hot topic on antidepressants, bipolar disorder, and some of the very important topics about polypharmacy, adherence, which will feel very incomplete if we don't cover these things, and some clinical dilemmas in Indian context. I've also kept some 5 MCQs, as Paneerselvan sir was mentioning, threaded throughout the presentation. So please pay attention, and it is all, the answers are embedded in the slides as well. Let's move on to the presentation. The first one, setting the context. So the National Mental Health Survey 2016 tells us that there is 0.5% of lifetime prevalence of bipolar disorder, which translates to approximately 70 lakh individuals, 70 lakh. And the recent unpublished data from NMHS2, which is going on, which also says, which is about 0.7%. So the numbers are not changing much. It is around the same numbers or even higher. But the number which is sobering is the other two numbers. One is the 70% treatment gap, which means that 7 in 10 individuals with bipolar disorder are not getting treatment. But you see the third panel, which is 40% relapse after taking treatment and 20% relapse even on ongoing treatment. That shows you that we are not doing something which is fine, or we have not still reached the stage of a proper adequate treatment. Is it so? So the core clinical problem is this. Choosing a mood stabilizer, particularly in the context of bipolar disorder, is not just a drug lookup exercise. It is a clinical reasoning exercise where you take into account the patient's diagnosis, the patient's face, the drug characteristics, the patient's profile. And because of these reasons, the same drug can be right or wrong depending on the face, subtype, polarity, and patient profile. So both, for example, both patients have bipolar affective disorder, current episode mania. But the same drug can be right for one patient, can be wrong for another patient. So that is where the complexity comes. That's where it becomes interesting also. So as you all know, bipolar disorder is an episodic disorder, and predicting the next episode becomes really impossible at times. But what we should focus on is addressing the modifiable factors of recurrence of episode, which is mostly non-adherence to treatment in various forms. And there are other huge list of risk factors for recurrence, but there are some certain general pharmacological principles to counter the recurrence. This we will see in detail in each phases, but it is better to have an overarching principles, pharmacological principles when it comes to bipolar disorder. So one is about maintain on the drug which is effective on the acute phase. If the drug has worked for the patient in the acute phase, irrespective of maybe in the guidelines, you might say that the another drug is better compared to this drug. But then because it has worked for this particular patient, you prefer to continue in the maintenance phase as well. And consider polarity of the most recent episode or the predominant polarity for when you choose maintenance. And pharmacotherapy is the mainstay. And all the psychosocial, very, very important, but they are urgent. And treat early and adequately, because inadequate treatment again accelerates illness kindling, and then you don't get adequate response, and then all lot of complications trip in. And always have treatment goals beyond relapse prevention. Monitor for residual symptoms, monitor for any cognitive deficits, impairment in functioning, because that is going to affect the recurrence of the episodes. And in our context or in any context, engage the family, because expressed emotions are sometimes very powerful drivers of outcomes. Always don't forget these factors. With this, let us move to the next section on what is a mood stabilizer. It's a very debated topic in the history and in the current sense as well. You would have read in CANMAT guidelines in 2018, they would have mentioned that we are not going to use the term mood stabilizers in the article because it is very confusing. So people who are internationally, this term has been a very confusing term. There have been different definitions given by different experts in the field about what a mood stabilizer is. For example, Calabrese, a very well-known professor in bipolar disorder, had defined a mood stabilizer as a drug which is effective in decreasing frequency or severity of any episode and does not worsen other episode types. Whereas Keter in 2002 had defined mood stabilizer as a drug effective in mania, depression, and in preventing both mania and depressive episodes. But if you see this, the term mood stabilizer, it's a very problematic term itself. Professor Malhi in 2018 has put together all these problematic things about this term. He describes that because if you take mood stabilizer drugs, okay, it includes lithium, it includes valproate, it includes quetiapine, it includes aripiprazole, the drugs of different disparate drug classes, and you do not know why do you call all these drugs as a mood stabilizer. Of course, all these have mood stabilizing property, but then you can call all the drugs like that, right? But where you are, some people are classifying few drugs as mood stabilizer, some people are classifying many drugs as mood stabilizer. So it becomes a confusing term itself. The category is very heterogeneous. And defining a drug as mood stabilizer may be less important than the clinical profile of the patient. So you really do not know whether you have to spend time on classifying this as a mood stabilizer. But the term cannot be abandoned because of its widespread use in clinical practice. Because often lithium we call as a mood stabilizer, or when we communicate to our colleagues, we say that you start mood stabilizer for this patient, you add mood stabilizer for this patient, right? We are using this term very widespread. So the term cannot be abandoned just like that. So these are all the dilemmas behind the term mood stabilizer. And of course, the complexity of the bipolar disorder itself and the treatment itself. If you see the treatment phases, you have acute phase treatment, you have continuation phase treatment, you have maintenance treatment, and then you have to address relapse, you have to address recurrence, you have to address treatment emergent affective switch. So there are a lot of things into a single disorder, and you are actually aspiring to give a single drug which should take care of all these different elements in the treatment. So it becomes very difficult for one drug to pull off everything, right? So here comes a problem. So when you say that, okay, I want an ideal mood stabilizer for my patient, but the reality is this. So we are asking the drug to be effective against acute mania, effective against acute depression, prevents mania, prevents depression, does not cause switch, and also should have anti-suicidal properties, because bipolar disorder and suicide is very interlinked, right? So I have just tabulated here based on the CANMAT and based on our recent guidelines to just show that where does our commonly prescribed drugs stands. Of course, there are various other drugs. You might say that cariprazine is not here, lurasidone is not here. I'm just giving you a context of why this mood stabilizer term and why this ideal search for an ideal mood stabilizer can be in reality very difficult. For example, if you take lithium, you can see that it almost comes closest to the ideal mood stabilizer, but it is not effective for acute depression. Whereas in quetiapine, almost in recent evidence, at least it shows that it is effective for everything, but it does not have an anti-suicidal property. And lamotrigine for depression, yes, but for mania, it does not cover. And acute episodes, again, is a problem, right? And valproate, again, depression, it's a problem. Whereas for mania, it covers mixed episodes. It's a wonderful option. And aripiprazole, I have my own dilemmas about aripiprazole, but however, at least on paper, it shows that in mania, in acute mania, in preventing manic relapse, aripiprazole works better. So no single agent currently available do not meet the criteria, all the criteria of an ideal mood stabilizer. So we cannot, so this means that you cannot search or aspire for the ideal mood stabilizer for my patient. Rather, you should shift the focus towards what is best for that particular patient. So there is a grading of shift happening here. Rather than going behind the drugs, you go behind the patient profile and then the patient disorder characteristics and the patient symptom profile and sociodemographic profile, and then choose a drug which is ideal for the patient. So it's not entirely pessimistic in the way that you can make it optimistic by just shifting your focus from ideal mood stabilizer towards a patient specific treatment. So that is where we are now. Based on this, let's see our first MCQ. It's a bit tricky. So just think for 15 seconds and answer in chat box. What is the current weighted prevalence of bipolar disorder according to India's National Mental Health Survey 2016? Option A, 0.3%. Option B, 0.5%. Option C, 0.7%. Option D, 1%. I feel like Kaun Banega Crorepati right now. Shall we wait for a minute?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
already
can
more
start.
than 10 responses. So we will note down the responses. You can move with the
We can move
presentation.
on? Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Nurul, I also request you to give me a reminder by around, say, 12:35 or something, so that I am aware of the time.
Yeah, I will give the reminder by 12:25, then second reminder.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. The correct answer is 0.3% weighted current prevalence of bipolar disorder. Let's move quickly to our next section, the decision framework. So now we have seen that, okay, we cannot run towards an ideal mood stabilizer. Instead, we should run towards a patient-specific approach or a very individual approach. In a sense, a personalized medicine, which we all are, in trend right now. So there are 4 axes. There is a axial system you would have heard about in ICD-9, right? So like that, there is a 4 axis. It's not strictly very compartmentalized like that, but it's very handy in your bedside clinical practice. 1, about efficacy profile. So you think this is all tailored to your patient, what you are seeing, right? So you see which phases does it cover about the drug which you are choosing for your patient. And you see the evidence grade, RCT, open label, post hoc, meta-analysis, mega-analysis, so many things have come up. And you see the spectrum efficacy, meaning which it covers both mania and depression, or only mania, only depression, only acute, only maintenance. You have various permutation and combinations. And you also see a number needed to treat, whether it will be really effective for this patient, right? So that is about the drug. So only one axis is the drug. So let's go to the next axis, which is patient-specific factors. You are going to see the age of your patient, whether it belongs to adult population, children, adolescents, old age, reproductive age, women, or patient with other medical comorbidities, or patient with other psychiatric comorbidities. Those are the things you are going to see. And also, what is the predominant polarity of this particular patient? Is there a suicidal risk? If the patient is treated with any agents before, what is the prior response to those particular agents? For example, your patient would have had quetiapine trial previously, which is rated very good efficacy in terms of all the episodes. But then you might have seen that past 5 episodes or 4 episodes, patient has not responded to quetiapine. Then you cannot choose only based on efficacy profile. No. CANMAT guidelines has told me that quetiapine is the wonder drug. So I will give quetiapine irrespective of patient has responded in the past or not. So you have to kind of tailor-made to the particular patient. The third axis is the safety and tolerability. You are going to, particularly it comes into place when in special populations like reproductive age, women, metabolic burden, the monitoring for lithium, renal and thyroid monitoring, or even the Steven Johnson's risk for lamotrigine and carbamazepine. So all these things you are going to have a checklist in your mind. Okay, this I'm going to give to this patient, but I'm going to monitor these things. And the fourth axis becomes the adherence and the practical factors. This is very, very important because you cannot give lithium to a patient who is living some 300 kilometers from your clinic. And in that period, there is no lab nearby his home, his or her home, or nearby any psychiatrist, his or her home. And then expect that he should come every 3 months or every 6 months for your lithium monitoring. It becomes very difficult, right? So monitoring burden, what the patient can accept or what is practically possible for that patient. And pill burden and dosing frequency. We often see a lot of patients complaining that they're going to work, they are having difficulty in having tablets in the afternoon, they are having difficulty having tablets in the morning, right? So all those things you need to keep in mind: cost, availability, affordability, So basically here we don't get acinapin in our center. So I can't say that, no, it is sublingual acinapin is the best for agitation. So I should give that only. So also about availability in the Indian context, therapeutic alliance and family support. For example, if the patient is very distressed about lithium-induced acne, but then you say that lithium is the gold standard, I will give lithium only, otherwise I will not give any other drug. So you cannot have that. You have to have a good therapeutic alliance, and then patient's confidence also into you while you are prescribing the drug. So these are all the very, very important factors you have to keep in mind. So basically, you have to keep this checklist or in the template in your mind whenever you are choosing a particular mood stabilizer for a particular patient. Hope I'm clear. We will go to, with this framework in mind, we will go to the next very, very important leg of this presentation, which is phase-specific treatment. So here, as I said, one is you are moving your focus from running towards an ideal mood stabilizer to a patient-specific treatment. In the patient-specific treatment, when from a pharmacology perspective, from a drug perspective, which is more important, the phase, right? For example, in bipolar 2, you see that depression is a major morbidity. Then what you should focus on? Treating depression, preventing depression. For example, in bipolar disorder 1, mania plays a major role. Of course, in India, we see that mania is more problematic than depression. Then you cannot afford to give antidepressants for bipolar 1, right? So these are all the nuances which you have to keep in mind depending on the phases and the predominant polarity the patient has, and what are the phase you are targeting for that particular patient. So we will see grossly about what do the guidelines, incorporating the important ones from the guidelines. First, so I have divided this into acute mania, mixed, bipolar 1 depression, bipolar disorder type 2, and maintenance. So these are all the major phases. Of course, you have some subsyndromal symptoms, you have residual symptoms, you have relapse, you have recurrence, various nuances here. But once you have the basic foundation, you can always build it on in your practice, in your reading as well. So when it comes to management algorithm, these are slightly different from your familiar CANMAT 2018 guidelines because I have taken these from the recent IPS guidelines, which is more relatable to our context, right? And which is the most recent one, which is 2026. So in the context of which I have taken some of the major changes which I have incorporated from the IPS guidelines. So you have basically first line, second line, and third line. Okay. So what do you think about first line, second line? When you think about first line, second line, immediately our mind goes to, okay, first line is the best ones. Second line is maybe not the best ones. But here it doesn't mean like that. The second line is classified not based on the efficacy of the drugs, but based on the tolerability of the drugs. Okay. So the first line monotherapy, of course, you have lithium and quetiapine in the top and valproate, and second generation antipsychotics, acinapin, aripiprazole, risperidone, cariprazine. So basically, all the drugs which are effective against acute mania also works for agitation or aggression, which is a core component of acute mania, or which is a more problematic feature in acute mania. So you don't need to worry that, okay, I'm treating only for acute mania, I'm not targeting agitation. Agitation gets treated as a part of it. But then because agitation is a very important clinical presentation, which can cause risk of harm to others, risk of harm to self, and it decides on the setting in which we are going to treat the patient. So there is some specific agitation management guidelines, which even the CANMAT, IPS guidelines have focused on, about first to try verbal de-escalation, first to try oral, and then parenteral. In parenteral, of course, you all would have been giving haloperidol and promethazine, haloperidol and lorazepam whenever patient has agitation. And then there are some second line, but they also emphasize on not only these parenteral drugs, but also the safety monitoring, vital signs, hydration monitoring as mandatory as these drugs to maintain for the agitation. And along with first line monotherapy, they also give some specifiers. When do you have to go for combination? Combination here means you give a mood stabilizer along with a second generation antipsychotic, preferably any first line antipsychotic. When do you give that? For higher, if you think that, no, I'm not able to manage this patient at all. Patient is getting restless every day, agitated every day despite starting medications. and has psychotic symptoms, or you want a faster response, then you give, because lithium will take some time to act, right? Then you give a combination treatment. And of course, benzodiazepine you can judiciously use adjunctively for agitation or insomnia. Lorazepam or clonazepam you can use. These are the specifiers where you change or you adapt strategies based on the presentation. And second line, of course, becomes carbamazepine, olanzapine, ziprasidone, haloperidol. And ECT comes here when the patient has severe agitation, need rapid response, or treatment failure. You can give ECT early in the course. We also have some evidence on even ECT can be given for even first episode mania from our center, which we have found that first episode mania, even ECT is given so frequently compared to the Western literature. So these kind of evidences you don't see in the West, but you get it from our Indian literature. And the third line, of course, becomes clozapine or chlorpromazine in resistant cases, and combination with clozapine or chlorpromazine along with other medications. So this is the overall gist of how can you choose a mood stabilizer for management of acute mania in focus, specific focus for agitation management and for severity, higher severity like psychotic symptoms, treatment resistance, like that. Then moving on to mixed episodes. Mixed episodes, again, you can ask that now mixed episode is not there in DSM-5, there is only mixed symptom specifier. But we often encounter these mixed episodes in our clinical practice. So it's very difficult to remove that term mixed episodes from our, clinical guidelines. So it's a distinct clinical challenge because here you have both manic symptoms and depressive symptoms. So you don't know which one to target first. You cannot negate depressive symptoms. You cannot negate manic symptoms, right? So the first step the guidelines recommend is stop anything which is kind of exaggerating or exacerbating the mixed symptoms. Maybe it could be antidepressants, it could be some substance which the patient is using, or the stimulants, because these are known to worsen the mixed states and increase manic switch and suicide risk. So these are very, very important pointers for us to look for. So you just see the prescription or what the patient is taking. If it has something which has an effect on the mixed symptoms, then you immediately straight away go and taper and stop the medications, or immediately stop the medications depending on the tapering guidelines which you already know. And then when it comes to specific mixed mania, and then you can have mixed mania, you can have mixed depression, right? In mixed mania, again, antipsychotics are the in the first line, like aripiprazole, olanzapine, cariprazine, ziprasidone, and valproate plays a very important role. Over and above, for a longitudinal data, it has been shown that valproate works very well for acute mixed mania treatment, even over lithium in this case. And you might be wondering that because in CanMat and all that, you might be wondering that quetiapine you see almost for every phases. But here, on a contrast, you see that in first line mixed mania, quetiapine do not figure in. So that is something which you have to keep a note. And then in mixed depression, of course, cariprazine, lurazidone, or these are recent evidences. There are only some few RCTs which are showing up, but then because they were definitely had a good improvement, they are featuring in the guidelines. And lumateperone, again, one RCT is showing that bipolar depression with mixed features, it can be given. So basically, you have to understand that mixed depression is something which is known to be very difficult to treat. And the earlier conventional agents like risperidone, olanzapine, quetiapine, they have not figured in the guidelines because there is no definite evidence about these improvement. But then the recent drugs like cariprazine, lurazidone and all are featuring in because they are showing some initial evidences, but then we need more longitudinal data. You have to understand the difference. Whereas when we consider lithium, valproate and all, we have years of evidence about these drugs on these phases, whereas cariprazine, lurazidone and all are growing with us. So we have to keep that in mind. And second line, of course, carbamazepine and lithium for maintenance, not specific for acute episode. But if you think that in maintenance treatment, lithium is very, very beneficial for this patient, you can actually start it in the acute phase and then build over for the maintenance phase. And of course, special attention to ECT when there is catatonic symptoms, stupor, high suicidal risk. And As I said, quetiapine monotherapy, paliperidone monotherapy, risperidone do not have sufficient evidence from at least the guidelines. But this does not mean that you should not prescribe for your particular patient if he or she has responded to quetiapine in the previous mixed episode. All these will change depending on your particular patient. But these guidelines give us some pointers that where you can go to when you are going to treat first time for that patient, or even the previous agents have failed, where you can fall back on. And from India specifically, we don't get mixed episode separate data because we have not systematically evaluated for mixed episodes specifically. And even after removing that mixed episodes term from DSM-5, the literature on mixed episodes also has come down very drastically. So it is very difficult. But then in all the RCTs generally in the world and in the India, whenever they are doing trials for mania, they generally include mixed symptoms as well. So extrapolation from the acute mania is somewhat reasonable here in the mixed episodes treatment. Next, coming to bipolar 1 depression. So here there are two challenges. One is you have to treat depression because depression is so distressing for the patient, and if you do not treat, it's going to run for a longer time, right? Because as it is, you know that depression runs for a longer duration compared to a mania. You would have read in all your literature. Along with that, if you give something to treat depression, the patient might go into mania because patient already has a bipolar disorder. So that is the second challenge which you have. So you cannot easily treat the patient just focusing on depression phase. So you have to be a bit more comprehensive in choosing a drug which will have an effect on the current episode, but also do not worsen the other episode. You remember the mood stabilizer definition given by various experts that exactly applies here. So for the first line, they say quetiapine, lurasidone, cariprazine, again the newer drugs feature in, and olanzapine, fluoxetine combination. Olanzapine fluoxetine combination is a very time-tested combination which has been used by various from primary care, secondary care, tertiary healthcare setting, which feature in lot of Indian literature as well, in our Indian evidence as well. But the main problem with that is the metabolic burden. But of course, it's in first line for bipolar 1 depression. In second line, you have valproate, mainly because valproate do not have a great evidence in depression maintenance. And you have adjunctive SSRI, never antidepressant monotherapy. So here we have to be very, very careful, and 2 times or even more than 2 times careful in giving adjunctive SSRI in comparison to bipolar 2 depression, because those two are completely different entities, though the name is similar. Okay. So of course, in second line, you have adjunctive SSRI because you want the patient to recover, and you feel very tempted to give SSRI, right? Even for a bipolar disorder patient, you feel very tempted, even though we hear a lot about SSRI worsen the course, SSRI increase the manic symptoms, switch and everything. And ECT can be first line here when rapid response is needed. Of course, we also have a lot of evidence from the Indian literature itself that ECT is very helpful in treating depression, particularly in bipolar disorder. And third line, you have carbamazepine or olanzapine and adjunctive aripiprazole. There are so many things. So this is about bipolar 1, mania, mixed, and depression, acute phases. And you have bipolar 2 disorder. Don't think that bipolar 2 is a milder form of bipolar 1. No, that is a separate entity by itself. Okay, you need to have, or you need to think a bit differently when you see a patient with bipolar 2 disorder, because here the depression is the major morbidity and you have hypomania here and there, right? So here again, your challenge is you have to treat depression and you should not worsen the hypomania symptoms or the switch symptoms. So that is one challenge. Second is, you just remember this as a mantra in your head for bipolar 2 disorder, that the main goal for maintenance treatment in bipolar 2 disorder is depression prophylaxis. Because depression is the major burden for these set of patients. Okay, you often see treatment resistance. You often see frequent depressive episodes, longer depressive episodes in bipolar 2 disorder. So that is your major mantra in your head, that if the patient depression should improve and should not get another episode. So acute hypomania, you stop antidepressant stimulants, not always mandatory pharmacotherapy if it is mild and transient. And then combination is rarely needed, no hospitalization. Of course, if there is no hospitalization, only you call it as hypomania, right? Okay. Next, coming to bipolar 2 depression, acute episode. First line, of course, you have quetiapine or olanzapine fluoxetine combination. They keep on insisting you have to give at least a 6 to 8 week trial because it's a very hard to treat kind of an episode here. And there is some evidence for lumateperone. And here they suggest that you start lithium or lamotrigine if you're going to plan for maintenance treatment for this patient, because it will take some time to build. You know the pain, you all know the pain of building lamotrigine, and lithium again will take some time to build and reach the adequate levels, and you titrate and all that. So it is best to start during the acute phase. You plan ahead for the maintenance phase in the acute phase itself. So it gives you a extra space where you have a very comprehensive plan for your particular patient, that you are giving some drug for acute phase and you are also starting, for example, if you are starting quetiapine, but you are thinking about giving lithium because the patient has suicidality, the patient has family history of response to lithium or whatsoever reasons, you want to start lithium for maintenance. You start now itself during the acute phase and then build it up, and then you don't expect lithium to immediately give magic in the acute phase, but then that quetiapine will cover it off. So again, lurasidone and cariprazine extrapolated from the bipolar 1 depression data. And antidepressants are a bit more favorites here compared to bipolar 1 depression, because the switch rates are significantly lower. And the recent mega-analysis, which I have quoted here, Amsterdam and Zhu in Bipolar Disorder 2024, had actually showed that antidepressant has a good acute effect on bipolar 2 depression. Like we generally fear. So you don't need to get scared about antidepressant as soon as you hear the word of bipolar disorder. In bipolar 2, you can be a little bit more liberal about the choice of antidepressants. Of course, preferred is sertraline or venlafaxine or fluoxetine also. But then educate about symptoms of hypomania and stop if switch occurs. And maintenance, again, quetiapine, lithium and lamotrigine features in. And then generally, they say that for depression, acute treatment in bipolar 2, you keep antidepressants. And then for maintenance, you keep these classical lithium, lamotrigine, quetiapine, any of these drugs. But then you can continue antidepressants for some time if there is inadequate symptom control. And ECT, again, for suicidality, inadequate response. And depression, ECT is the best. That's what all our practices has been. Next, coming to maintenance. Maintenance, of course, you have a lot of things. But here I have taken 4 more important drugs or more familiar drugs for us when we use for maintenance, which is lithium, valproate, quetiapine, lamotrigine. As you see, lithium and quetiapine has a broader spectrum, which means that it prevents mania, it prevents depression. It comes closer to your ideal search. And valproate, of course, depression plus or minus, and then mania, it is good. Lamotrigine, mania plus or minus, and then depression, it is good. So that is your first line. So all of us have doubts about maintenance. So whenever patient comes with first episode mania in remission, you get a doubt whether what I should do now, whether I should taper and stop the medications, continue, give a maintenance prophylaxis or not, or after second episode if they come, after third episode if they come. So you get into a dilemma of whether do you want to give maintenance prophylaxis for this particular patient. Leave about the literature, leave about the evidence. But when you actually come to treat a patient, you are thinking about whether will this patient definitely develop a future episode or not? Should I burden this patient with lot of metabolic burden or even other monitoring burden or the pill burden? So these are the things which you keep in mind, or often you get into this dilemma when you see a particular patient in remission from the acute episode, but you think about whether you have to give a maintenance treatment. So, of course, our recent consensus also has talked about this dilemma for maintenance, against maintenance. There are a lot of people who believe that not every patient with bipolar disorder require maintenance, but there are some pointers which the expert consensus has given, that if there is a family history of bipolar disorder, or if the recent episode or the past episode was a very severe episode which required IP care, which had psychotic symptoms, which had mood incongruent psychotic symptoms, which required ECT to control the symptoms, or if the patient has such high functionality or the relapse cost would be too much, is the single breadwinner of the family. Those are the social factors you keep in mind. You cannot afford, or the patient cannot afford to have a next episode in his life. So these are the pointers you think about when you give a lifelong maintenance, or even not committing to lifelong therapy, at least maintenance for 12 to 18 months, keeping in the pharmacological principles in your mind. Like, we have seen that whatever works in acute phase, you try to give it in maintenance phase, but not in the same dose, at the minimum effective dose, you continue for the maintenance. And we have again strong evidence that in Indian data, 80% relapse within 10 months of lithium discontinuation. This is one of the major thing which goes favor of giving maintenance treatment rather than just finishing in acute and then say, okay, come again for the next episode, right? So, yeah. Dr. Nooral, I'm aware that it's 12:30 already. Yeah. Now coming to the next MCQ, let's gear up. So, a 32-year-old woman with bipolar disorder 1 presents with an acute mixed episode. She is currently on sertraline 100 mg for depressive symptoms. What is the most appropriate first step? Okay, I'm not saying everything is wrong, everything is right. You choose the most appropriate first step. What will you do? Add valproate to the existing sertraline, switch sertraline to lithium, stop the antidepressant, then initiate aripiprazole, add quetiapine to sertraline, and reassess in 4 weeks. Can we wait for 30 seconds, 60 seconds? Nooral sir? Have we? Okay. How do I know whether this is for this MCQ or? Okay.
We can look at the timestamp, ma'am. We are noting down the answers. We have
Okay.
got predominantly C's everywhere. Option C, answers are everywhere.
Okay. Sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So yeah, it's answer C. The first step in managing my mixed episode is to stop antidepressant. That is the first rule which you follow, which is a mantra for you. And other precipitants, they exacerbate mixed states, accelerate cycling, and increase suicidal risk. The first line agents here are not lithium. Unfortunately, in mixed episodes, you have aripiprazole, asinapine, olanzapine, cariprazine. So adding to ongoing antidepressants without stopping them first is incorrect. Next section, drug by drug profiles. I'll quickly brush it through because we are going in short of time, and then we will see how it comes in. So I'm starting with lithium because lithium is our very favorite drug, gold standard, comes very closer to an ideal mood stabilizer. So you can give an acute mania, maintenance depression. Those are all the evidence you have. Apart from its mood stabilizing property, it is also anti-suicidal. So there are a lot of evidences, mainly from the observational cohorts, which says that it has an independent anti-suicidal property irrespective of its mood stabilizing effect. Okay. But again, this is a very debated topic. Here, recently, I was reading one systematic review and meta-analysis which showed that lithium in prospective trials at least do not seem to have that much of an efficacy for suicidal. Of course, you have to interpret with caution, which I have mentioned here, Kessin International Journal of Bipolar Disorder 2024. And it has some other other medical benefits as well. It attenuates osteoporosis and cancer risk. You would have seen that molecule in clozapine-induced neutropenia in your Maudsley, reduces all-cause mortality, superior long-term functional recovery, and imagine this is a drug which is there since John Cade used it, right? So you have a long, rich amount of data for this molecule about their longitudinal effects, its adverse effects, its acute effects. So you can trust this drug and you can close your eyes and just go ahead and give it. Okay, so you don't need to think twice about this drug if you think that this patient will improve. Very good with lithium. You don't need to have any hesitation to prescribe this molecule if you ask me. Okay. But why is lithium being underprescribed? Because monitoring anxiety, like how with clozapine we have, right? So like this, there is a significant monitoring anxiety. And then we are forcing ourselves to think that second generation antipsychotics like quetiapine are replacing lithium. But then you remember all these quetiapine or recent cariprazine, lurazidone, or very, very, at least cariprazine, lurazidone, all baby molecules, they are growing with us in psychiatry. Whereas lithium is our great grandfather or great great grandfather or grandmother. So you don't need to hesitate giving lithium if you think that you can monitor, the patient is comfortable, patient has improved well. Particularly if there is a family history of bipolar disorder, family history of, good lithium response, you have suicidality, and predominant euphoric mania, predominant mania episodes. So it's a very wonder molecule, I would say. So do not hesitate to prescribe lithium just because of other factors. If you are saying that the predominant is mixed episodes, that's why I'm not giving lithium, fair enough. But for other reasons, do not hesitate to prescribe lithium. Next is valproate and lamotrigine. Valproate, as you all know, there are some increasing restrictions being put even in recent, European guidelines, and then the registry in 2024. They say that do not start in less than 55 years without 2 specialist opinions plus documented absence of alternatives. Even they say that it applies to males also. So valproate is a very, very, you have to give with caution in this particular age group because of the teratogenicity risk. And of course, you have to monitor hepatic functions and lipids and glucose before you start the drug. Lamotrigine, the main problem with lamotrigine on a practical thing which we face is the titration. Because the rapid titration is equal to rash risk. You are going to face Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And of course, biologically, if you see that you have these HLA-B1502 allele, which is more frequent in Asian ancestry, which is more prone for Stevens-Johnson syndrome. So particularly for us, we need to be a little bit more careful on lamotrigine and carbamazepine. So they say that don't rush titration whatsoever. If you are saying that you are going to plan lamotrigine for acute episode, don't do that. You don't have efficacy also, and you cannot do it without the adequate time as well. So the titration, which they say is start at 25 mg per day. After 2 weeks, make it 50 mg. After 2 weeks, plus 50 mg, and then go to 100, and then 50 mg every 2 weeks to target to 200 mg per day. And slower the titration, better is the compliance and the tolerability of the drug. Next, quickly to carbamazepine. Carbamazepine, again, is a second line agent, particularly in dysphoric mania, in mixed episodes. It has good evidence. It has come to second line mainly because of the tolerability. And, you cannot give with oral contraceptives because it reduces the efficacy of oral contraceptives. And of course, teratogenic, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, as I was mentioning, very theoretical if you want to, focus on the HLA-1502 allele, which is very, very common in our Southeast Asian ancestry. So now summing up our second generation antipsychotics, you can close your eyes and then whatever drugs you want, you can just list it out: quetiapine, lurazidone, cariprazine, aripiprazole, olanzapine, risperidone, asinapine, lumateperone. Lumateperone I have added here to maybe to have more positive attitude towards lumateperone. I have very little experience with lumateperone, maybe close to some 10 patients have given lumateperone so far in bipolar disorder, and reasonable efficacy, we are noting it down, but then more evidence are required. But quetiapine, of course, it has acute mania, acute depression, maintenance, lurazidone in depression, cariprazine in mania. So I have put two ticks if it is first line, one tick if it is second line. So that's how I have put. This is mainly derived from CADMAT 2018 because I felt that is a very comprehensive listing which gives you the entire list of drugs. And olanzapine fluoxetine combination comes in mania and depression. Risperidone long-acting injectable is approved for maintenance, and asinapine, of course, and lumateperone, which is coming into the picture now. And there are some newer agents, of course, cariprazine, lurazidone, lumateperone, endoxifen. There are some evidences which is coming up in mania, in maintenance as well. And ketamine, which is again for a rapid response for suicidality, very quick response within hours. In case of if you're not able to give ECT and suicidality is a predominant presentation, you can of course consider ketamine and relatively better administered in a clinic in any of the clinical setting. And pramipexole again coming in for treatment resistant bipolar depression. It is coming in for different indications. We have to, we have to grow with this and then see and then contribute to the evidence also by us. And there are some baseline and ongoing investigations which are required. All of you know lithium has renal effects, thyroid effects. You have to keep in watch. And valproate, you have to see liver function, glucose, HbA1c, carbamazepine again, liver function, renal function, antipsychotics, metabolic burden, ECG, all of this has to be done in baseline and ongoing. I will share the slides. You can have this and then have a look at it. So this finishes the drug by drug profile, whatever you need to know for your clinical practice in CRUX. And you have some special situations where women of reproductive age, you can ask what drug is useful or what drug you can give here, because everything seems to have some or the other problems, particularly for bipolar disorder. Very, very, very tricky to deal with bipolar disorder in women of reproductive age, because valproate has major congenital malformation. Even if you are reading through the CANMAT guidelines, they would say that the folic acid 5 mg, which we give as a prophylaxis, in the preconceptional period when people are on antipsychotics or psychotropics, that is not effective for valproate-induced neurodevelopmental defects. So then you have to be more careful, because you think that folic acid is the wonder drug which is going to save from everything, but then you see that no, it is not for valproate. So you have to be really, really careful in prescribing valproate in reproductive women. And lithium was a big talk of the town about Epstein's anomaly for many, many, many years. And then later on, now we are getting to know that it is actually not that kind of a scare you should have about lithium. It is about 0.05 to 0.1%. Of course, it is a fatal one, Epstein's anomaly. But then you can prefer if only lithium has worked for this patient, and you can adjust the dose in pregnancy. Of course, there are some hemodynamic changes which happens during pregnancy. And carbamazepine, again, teratogenicity risk. Lamotrigine is a good option for women of reproductive age group, because it is the major congenital malformation closely comes to your population baseline, and depression dominant, of course, you can give. You have to monitor infant for the rash. And quetiapine and olanzapine relatively safe, because it all comes in class C. As you know that you have a class C, class B, class D and all that. Valproate, carbamazepine, all that goes in class D. And all your second generation antipsychotics goes in class C. Class C means no documented risk. Class D is definitely there is risk is there in the human data. So of course here, this population, reproductive age group, pregnant or planning for pregnancy, this particular subset of people, I would say that second generation antipsychotics comes very handy for you to because if you have quetiapine, it comes closer to an ideal mood stabilizer. It treats mania, it treats depression, it prevents mania, prevents depression, and you can give in this particular subset. So definitely think this molecule when you are treating a reproductive age women who are planning for pregnancy or pregnant. Aripiprazole, there is a lactation failure risk. There is a recent data from our center itself, which looked at the lactation failure and saying that 74% had lactation failure with aripiprazole, which is a huge data, actually 400 people of, this population. So avoid antepartum if breastfeeding is planned for this. Next, coming to rapid cycling. Rapid cycling, as you all know, the definition is more than on 4 mood episodes per year. So step 1, assess what is causing rapid cycling from your available evidence. If there are antidepressants, stimulants, substance, thyroid, or any organic conditions, sleep disruption, irregular circadian rhythm, first correct all that. In pharmacological approach, generally we see that in rapid cycling, lithium is not effective. More episodes, lithium do not affect. It is not actually. So I can say for sure in mixed episodes, lithium do not work that better. But in rapid cycling, you can, of course, take a call on lithium depending on the patient. For example, recently we were reviewing some 10 years of course of bipolar disorder from our center who are on lithium and who have responded to lithium. We clearly say that the lithium responders, definitely the frequency and severity of episodes have decreased over time. It does an amazing job in maintenance. So you don't need to just avoid lithium just only because if the patient has rapid cycling. You can, of course, take this thing. Of course, there was an RCT which showed that valproate is better than lithium, but that was based on post-hoc analysis. And what to avoid? Antidepressants, monotherapy. Basically, you go for combination. You want some different molecules to combine together and give so that the patient this thing better. Of course, mood remission is your goal here because you want to reduce the severity and you want to reduce the frequency here. And treatment resistance, of course, checklist, you have to evaluate and rule out pseudo resistance, and you have clozapine, carbamazepine, ECT, or all your favorite handy options when it comes to mania and combination options. Again, depression, of course, ECT tops the list here. Remission rates of 50 to 60% in treatment resistance. And then you keep on trying what all you have evidence in treatment resistance, like how you treat treatment resistant schizophrenia. As you try different neuromodulation techniques, or you try addition of thyroxine, whatever works for the patient. And clozapine is a very handy molecule in treatment resistance, refractory BD. And then again, clozapine, you don't need to fear for the monitoring because now we know that agranulocytosis is very, very rare occurrence. And if you carefully monitor and educate the patient about clozapine and the clozapine dose increase in inflammatory states during fever, volume loss, and then ask the patient to titrate clozapine or come back to you and titrate clozapine, it's a wonderful molecule for particularly treating treatment resistance. And I'm going to skip ECT here and we go to the third MCQ. A 28-year-old woman with bipolar disorder 1 on carbamazepine 800 milligram per day for the past 2 years wishes to start oral contraceptive pills. Which of the following statements is correct? Option A, carbamazepine does not affect OCP efficacy, no changes needed. Option B, carbamazepine induces CYP3A4, reducing OCP efficacy, advise alternative contraception. Option C, lamotrigine induction increases OCP efficacy. So switch to lamotrigine first. Option D, stop carbamazepine immediately and switch to lithium before starting OCP. Hope we have got some answers. Nurul sir.
Yes, ma'am, we are getting responses.
Okay. Fine. So the correct answer is alternative contraception. We have already discussed this because it induces CYP3A4. And the next section is antidepressants. As you all know, antidepressants in bipolar 1, very cautious. Bipolar 2, more permissive. In the class, SSRIs has a moderate risk, which we commonly prescribe. MAO inhibitors are a high risk, and bupropion lowest switch risk. And treatment emergent affective switch, mainly the guidelines say that look for some behavioral activation symptoms rather than a full-blown mania episode. Some marked irritability, psychomotor agitation, not the classical pervasive mood symptoms. So look for the behavioral activation after starting an antidepressant and then act accordingly. And yeah, I'm going to skip this and we will go to MCQ 4. A 45-year-old man with bipolar disorder 1 has been on lithium 900 milligram per day for 3 years with good manic prophylaxis, but develops a breakthrough depressive episode. He has a BMI of 32 and type 2 diabetes, which is the most appropriate addition to his current regimen. Option A, olanzapine fluoxetine combination, I told you, which is the highest effect size in meta-analysis. Option B, quetiapine, broad spectrum and approved for bipolar depression. Option C, lurazidone, approved for bipolar depression with low metabolic burden. Option D, add an SSRI as adjunctive antidepressant. There are no options here purely wrong or purely right. It is mostly about whatever we have discussed so far and about the personalized approach. What do you choose for this particular patient, which is most appropriate? Okay. If you change one line, then the options actually might differ.
Madam, so can we take another 5 minutes? Is that okay?
Sure. Yes, I am
Yes.
actually in the final leg of my presentation.
Okay.
Yes. Can we see the answer, Nurul sir? Have you gotten the response? I'm not able to see the chat box, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think more than 5 responses we have received. We can move on. Most
Okay.
of them were C or B.
Okay. So Lurasidone is the best choice here, mainly because this patient has an type 2 diabetes, BMI of 32. You have a metabolic burden already on the patient. You don't want to give something. You have a better molecule like Lurasidone before going to quetiapine if the patient is affordable. So next, psychosocial interventions, as you know, that I have kept this slide mainly to emphasize that pharmacology cannot be the solo management for your bipolar disorder, even if you have chosen an ideal mood stabilizer for a particular patient. Always add this with, educating the patient, family focused interventions, if required, an IP or more deeper therapies, depending on the patient profile and the family profile. That becomes very important, because finally, if the patient is not happy because of psychosocial stressors in the family or because of expressed emotions, you are not going to see that kind of a magic improvement in your particular patient. And there are some clinical dilemmas. One is about, this is a very important, another important part in managing, on choosing a mood stabilizer. So far, when there is a comorbid, so comorbidity is a rule as rather than an exception here. You often see patients with anxiety, comorbid anxiety disorder, comorbid metabolic syndrome, prominent suicidal risk, substance use disorder, ADHD, personality disorder, OCD comorbidity, and whatnot. So when it comes to anxiety disorder, you have strongest RCT evidence, at least for quetiapine, and of course gabapentin and CBT for anxiety. And to avoid, I have mentioned here another column what you should preferably avoid. So when I share the slides, you please have a look at it. So avoid an high dose antidepressant without proper mood stabilizer cover, and then giving long-term benzodiazepine, which will lead to therapeutic dependence. And metabolic syndrome, of course, you choose a drug first to see with a lower metabolic burden whether you can manage, like lithium, lurasidone, and all that. Avoid higher metabolic burden drugs. Prominent suicidal risk, as I have already said, lithium has a specific anti-suicidal property irrespective of the mood stabilizing effect. So you can choose that. And substance use disorder, lithium plus valproate has some RCT evidence for alcohol use. But all these are very small evidences you have seen. And OCD comorbidity, here it is very clear that the mood stabilization becomes your first principle when it comes with comorbid OCD, because you see that in OCD, it waxes and wanes, right? In mania, it becomes less. In depression, it becomes more. So you get a hunch that when you treat mood episodes, OCD, of course, gets somewhere treated. You have to see for that particular patient longitudinally how it becomes for the OCD, and choose something like aripiprazole, uh, the drugs, because those will not worsen OCD. And SSRIs, CBT, of course, here becomes a major role for OCD if you want to treat OCD as a separate entity. And SSRIs under adequate mood stabilizer cover only if required. And clomipramine has a higher manic switch. Fine. And this I have already touched upon. So I will just briefly say that there is always a debate between whether you should choose a classical mood stabilizer like lithium or valproate, or whether you should choose a second generation antipsychotic, because a lot of importance is now being given second generation antipsychotic. But I want all of you to remember that all these hypes and all these different opinions come from evidences, right? When a RCT is conducted and lumateperone shows efficacy, then of course you are going to put that lumateperone is efficacious in depression. Right? So all these depends on how these drugs are being tested in the market, in the trials, and then you accumulate evidence from this, and then you get a meta-analysis, and then you get a mega-analysis. As I said, the conventional mood stabilizers like lithium and valproate has a very longitudinal history. So you don't need to fear to start these drugs just because you feel that SGA is the trend now. So keep that in case-to-case basis for choosing the choice of drugs. It should be individualized based on clinical profile, comorbidities, prior response, suicidality. So you have to take multiple factors in mind. So the clinician judgment is a very, very important part in your choosing your mood stabilizer the signs of choosing mood stabilizer for your particular patient. How much ever guidelines you have read, how much ever recent things you are aware about, but your clinician judgment is the crux here for choosing a mood stabilizer. Nothing beats that. So these are some clinical dilemmas I have put here. I think you can go through it. It's all self-explanatory. And yeah, and we come to the last MCQ. A 30-year-old woman with bipolar disorder 1, depression predominant polarity, BMI 28, planning pregnancy in 6 months, currently euthymic on valproate 1 gram per day. She comes and asks you about continuing this medication. Which is the best management plan? Option A, continue valproate, benefits outweigh teratogenic risk for her particular profile. Option B, switch to olanzapine, safe in pregnancy with good mood stabilizing effects. Option C, gradually cross taper to lamotrigine, ensure euthymia before conception with close monitoring in pregnancy. Option D, stop all medications 3 months before conception to avoid fetal exposure. So all these options would be right for different scenarios, or even if you change one line in the question. Okay, so you have to choose for this scenario, what is the most appropriate choice would you prefer? So again, here, nothing is perfectly wrong or nothing is perfectly right. But I made it such that your thinking process changes for a more clinically apt encounters. Have we got some answers?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So valproate is contraindicated in women. So that's a strict no. And you can actually gradually cross taper to lamotrigine because the patient is already on euthymia, and you can discuss with the patient, and you have 6 months time to build lamotrigine. So everything is very conducive for lamotrigine, and it is all very safe. If you give olanzapine or some other metabolic burden, you are going to again decrease the fertility risk, and all those things are also there for this particular patient, right? Fine. Coming to the summary, I've just put all 10 headings in 10 points here. Think phase first. The same patient needs different drugs at different times. No ideal mood stabilizer exists. Use the 4-axis framework. Efficacy, patient, safety, adherence. Lithium is irreplaceable if you ask me, because it has several other advantages apart from the mood stabilizing effects. And you have the best data for lithium. And of course, everybody has different opinions. You choose your clinician judgment for a particular patient. And valproate is a clinical powerhouse, but major regulatory restriction is reproductive age women less than 55 years. Always discuss, document, individualize. If at all you are choosing valproate in this women, be very, very, very careful. Lamotrigine, start early for depressive prophylaxis, but never rush titration because you are going to increase Stevens-Johnson syndrome risk. Mixed episodes, stop antidepressants first. So these are some of the mantras I have kept, that these are unnegotiable. Okay, other things come here and there. You have to modulate based on your judgment, but these are the mantras. And cariprazine and asinapine have best evidence. Bipolar disorder 2, more permissive with antidepressants. You can be a little bit more linear. Focus is depressive prophylaxis, not mania control, because you are not going to get mania for this group of patients. If they are getting mania, it's not bipolar disorder type 2. Antidepressants in bipolar disorder 1, adjunct only and comes in second line under adequate mood stabilizer cover, taper within 6 to 8 weeks of remission. You only use for acute management. Second generation antipsychotics versus mood stabilizer, it's not a white and black zone, it's a gray zone, individualized. Lithium has irreplaceable benefits. ESGS cannot replicate, but then you might think that for your particular patient, quetiapine works best than lithium, then go ahead for quetiapine. In India, adherence and family engagement first. We are dealing with 70% treatment gap, 40% relapse, 20% breakthrough episodes. So 80% relapse on lithium discontinuation. We are dealing with very, very high numbers, and we have lots to do in our career. And long-acting injectables are very, very underused in our Indian context. So we need more data on the efficacy of long-acting injectables, because it's going to come very handy when you are dealing with poor adherence, poor compliance, particularly when it becomes affordable for the patient. With this, I'm concluding my presentation. You can contact me at this mail ID for any doubts, for any discussion, for any interest in bipolar disorder or any mood disorder or any simple questions. You can always reach out to me. Thank you so much for patient listening. It's not an easy task to listen for 1 hour on a Sunday morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity. To all the organizers, I'm truly grateful and I completely enjoyed thoroughly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pavitra. So I think this session will have more than 100 or 150 Q&A from the audience. So it may not be we may not be able to cover all those questions. So I have three set of questions. Okay. Number one, in any treatment-resistant cases, we will prefer clozapine. So we have one experience with bipolar depression case. He had a very severe mania. He improved with high-dose antipsychotics and double mood stabilizer. Later, he developed a severe depression. So in Sneha, we have given 6 cycles of ECT. He didn't tolerate lithium at that phase. So we decided to start upon clozapine. Clozapine as a single molecule, and we have tried it up to 200 milligram. He remitted. And that worked to prevent mania also. So your thoughts on clozapine in treatment-resistant depression? It's a very different entity because I have seen only one case like that. So any thoughts on that?
In treatment resistance, particularly, be it schizophrenia, be it mania, be it depression, we have seen more in treatment-resistant schizophrenia, our favorite drug, favorite molecule there. But mania, of course, we would have seen a lot of patients in NIMHANS with mainly clozapine as a major drug. Treatment-resistant bipolar depression, not much, but then you get clues from even treating psychosis, right? Because it doesn't create that much of dysphoria where like you get in risperidone or you get in other first generation antipsychotics.
True.
Clozapine actually, elevates the mood or it becomes more mood wise, more better, even when you give in schizophrenia. So that gives some clues. And of course, this treatment resistance, particularly in the severe mental illness, schizophrenia and bipolar, they seem to behave very differently, Dr. Nurul. No, so they specific this particular subset, they seem to respond. Many of them seem to respond magically to clozapine, create more life-changing or very improvement in terms of clinical translatory effects, not only in YMRS, not only in SAPS and SANS.
Yeah.
So these cases actually encourage us to, go ahead and give clozapine trial in treatment resistance in these populations.
And the second set of questions.
Yes. I just want to make a comment. Dr. Ashwath.
Sorry to interrupt. I'll request Dr. Darpankar ma'am to give her concluding remarks. Ma'am is in the middle of a meeting.
Yes,
sorry for putting you to wait, ma'am. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwath Babu. It's an excellent presentation by Pavitra Jaishankar. Very well conducted and very comprehensive and very state-of-the-art presentation you have done. I'm sorry to little bit come pre-time to speak because I'm at the WDP India conference and there is some valedictory that I have to go and attend. So I will, with your permission from Dr. Paneerselvan sir, I will leave for some time. If the session is going on, I will like to join in and continue listening. If the discussion is over, then I just want to give my concluding message right now itself. So I think that Dr. Pavitra Jaishankar has very comprehensively conducted her presentation with ample interactions. It's almost like a workshop that she has done through the digital mode. So it is very creative and she is very passionate. And I'm sure that the residents who have attended today's program, they have been upskilled at all levels of the art and science of choosing the mood stabilizer. So I'm sure that they will be very confident in their own training to discuss and decide which mood stabilizer is good. I also thank you for sharing your Indian expertise, your NIMHANS experience, and overall the session has been very, very excellently presented. So congratulations to you, Dr. Pavitra, and thank you, Dr. Paneerselvan, for inviting me. Thank you, Dr. Ashwath Babu Srinivasan, and thank you for the East West Pharma. With your kind permission, I will just leave briefly. Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pavitra. Thank you very much. Thank you.
First two to be found, third will be option.
So for the want of time, we'll take 1 or 2 questions from the audience and then we can conclude, sir. It has already crossed 1 o'clock with the permission of Dr. Paneerselvan, sir. Sir, is that okay if we conclude, sir?
Yes, Dr. Ashwath. Take 1 or 2 questions from the chat box.
Sir, I think in the upcoming Ipsogon, we have to set up a separate workshop for this very big topic, because every practitioner and resident will be confused with the basic management. So I think instead of selecting psychotherapy or NIBS conventionally, as like every conference does, so we can better prefer this kind of a very pragmatic topic to discuss with some 7-8 topics from the expert lectures like Pavitra sir. I think we can consider this, I think, in Ipsogon.
Yes, sure.
Good
So-
evening, good afternoon, sir.
Okay, I will just interrupt for a minute. I have just shared some relevant materials which I have used for this presentation, and it will come very handy for you. Please download and use it at your convenience. Please, Arun Kumar, go ahead, Dr. Arun Kumar.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you for the wonderful presentation, first of all. And I work in Border Security Force. It's a paramilitary force where we deal with Jawans with mental health disorders. So we have some of the individuals who have suffered from bipolar disorder, but have been with no mania or depressive episodes for the last 2-3 years. But when I say that there needs to be some maintenance dose given to them, the first question arises is, we don't have any episode for the last 2-3 years, and we have not even taken medications. How to go about in such individuals?
Yeah, so this is one topic which requires some, which keeps on and on in our many debates and in our many panel discussions, that there is something called as a natural course of the bipolar disorder, irrespective of whether you give a mood stabilizer as a molecule or not. Okay. And a subset of patients, in our experience, is not coming from any controlled studies or from the evidence, but you see in your regular practice that there are some patients who develop only one episode mania and then do not develop any episodes later on for 5 years, 10 years. We have also had that experience. Then you are in this dilemma that evidence says that you give maintenance, you push maintenance, and then, whereas you see a patient who's doing very well, who's functioning and who do not have any mood episodes, and you are actually contradicting yourself in that. But the recent, the CPG consensus also acknowledges this subset of patients and says that you cannot give all the credit to only your wonder molecule, which all of us have been following. There could be a subset of patients who are developed only 1 or 2 episodes and then do not develop any further episodes. If you think that for your subset of patients, there is no positive family history, the episodes previously was not very severe, did not require that much of an intensive management, it was not a treatment resistant, it was a mild to moderate kind of an episode, you can go ahead and 2 to 3 years of euthymia or remission, you can, go ahead and take the risk with keeping in confidence your patients, saying that, so this is our evidence which says, but then there is also the subset which we have observed. So we would like to, I suggest that we can take a risk of not taking any treatment and then seeing the longitudinal course of it with a close follow-up whenever required, and explain them about the warning signs of relapse. And each patient will have their own signature prodromal signs of the episode. Just get to know about it and then just explain to them, and you will be able to, do this thing well. The core point here is you sit and spend time with the patient and the family, explain the rationale and decide whatever they want. If they say that, no, we don't want to take any risk, I cannot talk about that mania episode, I cannot imagine having another mania episode in the future, then you decide to give a mood stabilizer, which is appropriate for the patient. Oh, is
Thank
it?
you, ma'am. Ma'am, just in
They are not
continuation with the
allowed-
same, sorry to interrupt, that since we deal with arms and ammunition in the paramilitary force, taking a risk of not giving the medication will be a big factor for us. It is better to have a not rather than not giving a medication, having a maintenance dose, like maybe the only another doubt which I had is lithium or valproate, which is a better one to keep it in a maintenance, because from your slides what I felt, maybe lithium is in a better way to be handled if they follow up once in a year or once in 3 or 6 months also for monitoring of the same. Am I right? Or is there any other better maintenance drug which we can think of?
So, of course, in your situation, if you think that the patients are going to deal with arms and ammunitions, and it's an extra risk, that risk I have not mentioned in the slide. I will take it from you that this is an extra risk which you have to see when you are trying to give not a drug for the particular patient.
Might be in this war time, you could have added that.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So of course it makes I was not paying attention to the type of the patient which you described. So of course you have to give maintenance. See, this lithium and valproate, for example, if you hear from anybody, any other bipolar expert, they might say that quetiapine is the best. So it depends on, see, I have little bit favorite bias towards lithium. Okay, because I prefer lithium in many circumstances. But it again depends on whatever we have discussed, about the individual patient profile, the other indicators which tells you which drug might be better for your particular patient, lithium or valproate. If you think that there is comorbid substance use, they say that valproate is better. If it is predominant, if there are very little episodes like your case, whatever you are saying, lithium actually works better if you are able to monitor. So those are the stances you have to take depending on your patient profile. I think Balaji Bharadwaj sir also has shared
Thank you, ma'am.
famous Manipal study about the relapse.
And about oxcarbazepine, we tend to use lithium at every part of the bipolar, even for pregnancy also with controlled monitoring. But now the trend is towards the oxcarbazepine. So your thought, but I feel it is not at all working to prevent any manic episode. Wherever I started oxcarbazepine up to 600, they all had relapsed in the antenatal period. So I'm not sure. I think Pavitra and experience from Dr. Panisar also in this context.
Paneer sir, would you like to pitch in for oxcarbazepine experience?
Actually, I'm not using much oxcarbazepine nowadays. Only for the patient with the rapid cycling, and that case only we have a very bad experience with it, even the skin lesion. Few of my patients, because we are in private practice, few of my patients developed the Steven Johnson syndrome. One patient developed Steven syndrome, another patient developed skin rashes. So both oxcarbazepine and carbamazepine is not avoiding much.
Yeah.
Only for a selected patient, rapid cycling I'm using. One patient from German, and they have a severe bipolar disorder, rapid cycler. Even within 3 months, 2-3 episodes, even the month itself she is having. So in that case, I am using. Otherwise, I'm not using. But lithium is a wonderful drug. We are having a lithium clinic at our hospital in Tamil Nadu. We have a lithium clinic every Wednesday. We have a lithium clinic. We pull the patients. We do it lithium level, and we giving. Though recently they increased the price of lithium because they started using lithium for the batteries. So many companies stopped lithium, but we have a tie-up with some companies. We have been using lithium in a huge manner because economically safe, and we have a very lot of experience. I've been in the clinical practice for more than 30 years. So lithium is a wonderful drug. Maybe a lot of because of fear of monitoring only many people are stopping that lithium. Otherwise, lithium is a very wonderful drug, lithium. And lamotrigine is another drug. It's a good drug. For example, patients having a bipolar depression. It's a wonderful drug, lithium. Lamotrigine, only thing is we have to be very careful regarding the side of skin rash. So my favorite molecule number 1 is lithium. The second is that sodium, divalproate sodium. There's one question is asking why Dr. Pavitra. Please explain why valproate is contraindicated in male less than 55 years.
Okay. So, sir, thank you, sir, for your inputs. So basically all these evidences and whatever you have seen in your rich clinical practice adds on a lot to the practical this thing rather than going through. I mean, of course, the guidelines are very important, but these actually adds on to the from your legacy. So,
Sir is our
as you
candidate.
said, yes, of course, yeah. So, as sir was mentioning, oxcarbazepine also, Dr. Nurul, theoretically, on book, we see that better drug interaction profile than carbamazepine. So you can give. Recently, I had an experience. I had to change from carbamazepine to oxcarbazepine for a patient because we had to start on clozapine, then a lot of other. So those kind of things, we are little hesitant to start carbamazepine, but little okay to start oxcarbazepine if at all you have to start. But definitely not in the first line, does not figure in the first line options at all. And I think Dr. Abhishek is asking, why is valproate restricted in less than 55 years? Mainly because of the teratogenicity profile in the reproductive age group. And the recent one, the CPG guidelines, I just wanted to emphasize on that it says that even in less than 55 years age group, irrespective of the gender, you restrict giving valproate because of several reasons, not only about the reproductive age group, only for the pregnancy effect, but for all the overall reproductive profile, they suggest not to give valproate in less than 55 age group. And they have made it very stricter in sense that because even despite having lot of guidelines about valproate to restrict in potential pregnancy planning women or able to, in the age group women, they find that valproate is often prescribed in these readers. That is the reason why they are making the criteria more stricter. So I will just read out that line from the New Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency regulation, categorically state that valproate must not be started in new patients, male or female, younger than 55 years, unless two specialists independently consider and document that there is no other effective or tolerated treatment, or there are compelling reasons that the reproductive risk do not apply. So they are making the guidelines quite stricter for this, because more and more evidence we are getting about the reproductive adversity with valproate on both genders. So it is more preferable to you go for alternative options compared to giving valproate in this particular age group. I think we are reaching.
I think,
time.
yeah.
Thank
I
you,
think we
ma'am.
can go for the conclusion, I think.
Yes, sir. I request Dr. Paneerselvan, sir, to give the concluding remarks, sir. We'll conclude the session, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Pavitra, for a very wonderful, very informative information. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Aswath, Dr. Mugi, and all the participants for the active listening and also participated in the quiz. And thank you very much, all. The YouTube link will be available for the current also previous session in the website. You can please contact Resource Pharma for more other details. My special thanks to the sponsor, Resource Pharma, who has been sponsoring for this program for almost 2.5 years. We published the books also. The first edition, the Evolve Fuels also we released a book, and many authors, they are from Nimans, Dr. யாரெல்லாம் ஆத்தர் இருக்காங்க அருண் நபி அஸ்வத் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் புக்ல இருந்து
ஃபர்ஸ்ட் புக்ல ஐ திங்க் 10 authors இருக்காங்க. myself, சுபாஷ் சார், தாமஸ், Lakshmi Narasimha, like that.
Dr. Thomas, Isaac.
Yeah, many speakers, Dr. Vengat, Dr. Jagdish Sathitakali is my classmate, and many stalwart members also was speaker for this Evolve program. So thank you very much. With the Resource Pharma, what are thanks, you can conclude the session. Over to you.
Only one second. I request the speaker, if possible, you can share the mail to me, share the PPT or your notes regarding this presentation, so that we can incorporate in the next release of Evolve book as a chapter.
Sure, I will share. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Over to you, Naveen.
Thank you, sir. Our Resource Pharma is more privileged to propose vote of thanks in this insightful webinar of Art of Choosing a Mood Stabilizer. First and foremost, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to the co-head, Dr. Paneerselvan, sir, for his visionary leadership and continuous support in making such academic initiative as a long success. I would express my sincere thanks to our chairperson, Dr. Darpan Kaur ma'am, for the valuable presence, the guidance throughout the session. A special note of appreciation to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Pavitra Jaishankar ma'am, for delivering such an enlightened and clinically enriching session. Ma'am, your expertise and clarity have truly added immense value to all of our postgraduate, those who participated in the program, madam. Almost 135 people were attended up to the end of the session. We were also extend our gratitude and gratefulness to our moderators, Dr. Ashwath Babu sir, Dr. G. Suresh Kumar sir, and Dr. S.A. Noorul Hasan sir for seamlessly guiding the session and making it interactive and more engaging. I would like to thank all the postgraduate participants and doctors across India for enthusiastic participation and the keen interest shown on the webinar, which gives a grand success. Lastly, our thanks to our organizing team, and once again behind the scene, there is a dedicated coordinating even smoothly. Thank you for all once again, and looking for your continuous support in future academic endeavors also. For the recording version of the which is available with our East West Pharma, and it will be shortly uploaded in our YouTube channel. So have a great day ahead to all. Thank you, doctors.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Pavitra. Thank you, Noorul. Thank you, Aswath.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.